Two men dressed as police officers entered a Boston museum and stayed inside for 81 minutes. When they left, 13 works and objects were gone. More than 3 decades later, the most visible evidence is not a fingerprint, a weapon, or a map. It is a set of empty frames still hanging where the art once was. Those frames are unforgettable, but they are easy to misunderstand. They do not point toward the thieves. They do not reveal a hiding place. They show exactly what the public record can prove was lost and how little it can prove about where that property went. This episode does not select a favorite suspect or repeat every organized crime theory attached to the Gardner Museum heist. It follows the documented sequence, the FBI's list of missing objects, and the line between an active investigation and a solved case. The theft began in the early hours of March 18, 1990, at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. According to the FBI, 2 men dressed as police officers rang the night bell and claimed they were responding to a disturbance. Once admitted, they restrained the 2 security guards. What followed was not a quick smash and grab. The intruders remained inside for about 81 minutes. That duration matters because it gave them time to move through the museum, remove objects from several locations, and leave with a selection that still resists a simple explanation. The official record establishes the disguise, the entry, the restrained guards, the duration, and the missing inventory. It does not provide a verified public identification of the 2 people inside those uniforms. That distinction is the first boundary of the case. A detailed sequence is not the same thing as a named offender. Knowing how a crime unfolded does not mean knowing who planned it. The shorthand version says that thieves stole priceless paintings. The FBI list is stranger and more specific. The missing group includes Rembrandt's Christ in the Storm on the Sea of Galilee, Vermeer the Concert, Manet Wise Chez Tortiochny, several works associated with Dugah, and landscape with an obelisk, attributed on the FBI page to Flink. But the list also includes a Chinese bronze beaker and an eagle finial. In total, 13 objects were taken. The FBI values the missing property at more than $500 million and describes the theft as the largest property crime in United States history. The mixture invites theories. Some observers see knowledge in the choice of a rare Vermeer. Others see confusion in the smaller objects and works on paper. But the list itself proves only what was removed. It does not prove why each object was selected, whether every choice was planned, or whether the people inside understood the collection in the same way an art historian would. An unusual inventory is evidence of an unusual inventory. Motive requires something more. The empty frames became part of the museum's public memory after the crime. The FBI says the museum decided in 1994 to display the large gilded frames in the Dutch room, 4 years after the theft. The choice was intentional, a reminder of what had been lost and an expression of hope that the missing works would return. This detail corrects a common visual assumption. The frames are not a crime scene frozen exactly as the thieves left it. They are a later museum display built around absence. That makes them emotionally powerful and evidentially limited. A frame can identify the space a painting occupied. It can preserve the scale and shape of the missing work. It cannot tell investigators whether the canvas crossed a state line, entered a private collection, or was separated from the other objects. The frames are evidence of what is missing. They are not evidence of where it is. The numbers surrounding the case are enormous. More than $500 million in estimated value. A museum reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the safe return of the works. An investigation that has remained active for decades, but a reward changes incentives, not evidence. A valuation expresses cultural and financial importance, not the price an identifiable stolen masterpiece can safely command. And a continuing stream of tips does not mean that every apparent sighting is useful. CBS Boston reported in 2024 that the museum and FBI were still receiving tips and emails. Some people believed they had spotted missing works in photographs from real estate listings. The images turned out to show reproductions used to stage homes for sale. That example explains a central difficulty. Famous images are easy to recognize and easy to reproduce. Recognition can generate a lead, but authentication requires provenance, materials, dimensions, condition, and physical examination. A familiar image on a wall is not a recovered Vermeer. The bigger the reward and the more famous the theft becomes, the more important that distinction is. The FBI's current seeking information page lists all 13 objects and asks for public assistance. It states that the works were separated following the robbery and that their locations could now be widely dispersed. It also describes possible movement along the eastern United States. Those statements should be read as an investigative assessment, not a published chain of custody. They do not place a specific painting in a specific room. They do not publicly identify who moved it. And they do not convert decades of leads into a verified recovery. The FBI says its Boston field office continues to investigate with the museum and the Massachusetts United States Attorney's Office. The museum continues to offer its reward. The public list remains active because the objects remain publicly unrecovered. An active case can contain serious private evidence that is not released. But for a public reconstruction, the boundary must stay with what can be checked. The Gardner Museum heist contains 3 different levels of certainty. First, the theft sequence is documented. 2 men posing as police gained entry, restrained the guards, remained inside for roughly 81 minutes, and removed 13 objects. Second, the loss is precisely cataloged. The FBI publishes the titles and images of the missing works, and the empty frames preserve their absence inside the museum. Third, the decisive answers remain unverified in the selected current sources. They do not publicly establish the thieves' identities. They do not provide a verified present location for the objects, and they do not validate the many theories that accumulated around the gap. That is why the empty frames remain such a strong symbol. They show that a museum can know exactly what was taken, exactly when it was taken, and still lack the one fact needed to end the case. The frames mark the missing art. They do not point to it. If you want another investigation where the evidence proves the escape but not the outcome, watch the Alcatraz case next. The prisoners left their cells. What happened after the shoreline is still the unresolved part.